Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
And I'm Scott Warr. You know, your feet carry you through every single mile that you run out there. Yet most of us only think about them when they start to fail. Why do we always wait until they fall apart? And what can we do, or what can we be doing instead? Today's guest is Dr. Tanya Olson. She's a doctor of physical therapy, a foot care expert. She's a runner and a longtime ultra running medical volunteer. In fact, we just found out she's been at Michigan Bluff Aid Station since 2008. Did you say, Tanya?
2009. Well, yeah.
2009.
Would have been 8, but it got canceled.
Oh, that's right. That's right. We came across her because she recently wrote an article in Ultra Running Magazine called Happy Feet, a Modern Guide to Foot Care. Now, foot care isn't about having a little bit of duct tape in your pack and the heroics at mile 60 or anything like that. It's about smart preparation, modern solutions, which she's going to tell us about, and knowing how to protect your feet before they become that problem. So Tanya, thanks for joining us. Why do many ultra runners accept blisters and foot problems or breakdowns as part of the sport, when in reality, it can be prevented?
So there's a couple of different answers I could give here. For one, people, like, it depends on, you kind of become who you hang around. If everyone around you is consistently having blisters and they don't know what to do, then that's normal for you. Plus, there's just a weird little kind of vein of thinking in the ultra world where people think destroying their body is cool. And they kind of like to brag about it. Like, there's a little of that somewhere. And yeah, I'm just going to go with they don't know any better. And that's my platform, is to educate people that there is a better way to live.
And we're excited to learn about that. We've talked about on this podcast many times, and we've had the infamous John Vonhoff, who's the author of Fixing Your Feet. If you don't have a copy of it, now's the time to get a copy. And if you have an old copy, you should know that Tanya joined up with John and wrote the 7th edition of the book. Now, why are you thinking, why is there 7 editions of this book? Because knowledge and science has changed, and we're here to learn a little bit about what changes have happened. Tanya, you were around and running when John first wrote his first edition, I assume. What's changed over the years? What is the most exciting thing about foot care that you could tell us about?
Oh boy. Okay. The products that are available to use, the quality and the specificity of products that to use for foot care is just really advanced. Plus, people like myself who have advanced training in both biomechanics and wound care, like as a physical therapist, I've worked in a lot of different places. We're adding knowledge based on understanding tissue mechanics, tissue healing, shearing forces, friction. So I think the short answer, which is too late, is we've got better products available and a more comprehensive understanding of the topic at large.
What are the biggest mistakes that we're currently making? Now, let's say, okay, let me put it in this frame of mind. You're at Western States 2025. You've been there for a gazillion years, couple decades, decade and a half, and you see somebody come through with foot issues, whether it's blisters or what have you. What are the biggest mistakes we're currently making?
Well, the biggest mistake people make is they don't have a foot care plan. Like you said in the introduction, people don't plan on, there's not a preventive mindset just because people don't know any better. And so they don't have a foot care plan. No preventive measures have been implemented. And then stuff just goes sideways. And then all we can do, if it's on the course, is mitigate the damage We can't, and it's heartbreaking for me because Western states has changed so much. Like in the early days, it was realistic for people to be able to get into the race again. Nowadays, it's like it's a once in a lifetime chance. And when people come into it's happening less nowadays. We're having less carnage at Michigan Bluff because my voice is getting like people are learning and doing better. But for one, not having a plan. The basic foundation of a foot care plan is to prevent maceration. And maceration is how your skin weakens and becomes more fragile by being exposed to moisture over a prolonged period of time. So it's kind of like if you're in the hot tub or you're washing dishes and your fingers, they change colors, they turn a little white, and then they wrinkle. Well, that same thing happens to your foot skin, but a lot more is being demanded of the foot skin. And so preventing maceration is absolutely critical. And it's a matter of time. So no matter the longer you're out there, the higher chance of maceration. And so using a skin barrier product that's hydrophobic and creates a barrier and protects your skin from moisture is absolutely essential. Now, let's talk about the cause of moisture. Each foot has 250,000 sweat glands. So it's not the creek. It's not the one creek you run through at mile 60 or whatever in your race. It's the sweat that your skin is constantly pouring out that is bathing your foot skin. And not just sweat is salt water. And salt water is if anyone's done anything like with salt water in boats and all that, it's very corrosive and damaging. And so what happens is with maceration, the skin becomes more fragile. It can actually, the connection of the epidermis, which is the top layer of skin, and that's comprised solely of dead skin cells, and the dermis, which is the red part underneath, like if you get a blister and it's really painful, because that's where the blood vessels and nerves are housed. That connection between the epidermis and the dermis actually loosens through the process of maceration and running, because you've got, just kind of things are moving around in the shoe, and that it can almost delaminate. Like if I get somebody coming in and they said, "Oh, I've got a big blister on the bottom of my foot." I know, I've been doing this long enough, by the language somebody uses, I know what their foot's going to look like. And that once you get a delamination of that because of maceration, there's only so much you can do. The main thing you can do is tape over it and try to prevent the skin from tearing open on the bottom of the foot and then having that dermis fully exposed. But maceration. And then you need to know your feet. So you need to know your own problem areas, which requires you to actually look at your feet once in a while and do a little bit of maintenance. Pay attention to your feet. Notice if there's little spots on your feet or your toes that consistently have where the tissue breaks down. And then create a preventive plan to address those issues, and then have plan B and plan C and all that. So kind of a long answer to a short question, but that's what we got. Prevention. Look at your feet.
Well, I love the topic already. Just listening, I've been talking because I have 8 questions that I've written down. Now, Scott, that doesn't mean I'm going to ask all 8 right now, but sprinkled through this podcast, I hope to get a couple of these in. And the first one that came was one of the first comments Scott made: duct tape. Does that belong in a runner's kit, or does that belong in the car?
Dear God in heaven, read my article from December in Ultra Running Magazine. I think I may have said, put down the duct tape and back away slowly.
Well, good.
Duct tape, at one point in the ultra running world, like in the 80s, there was not another option. That was the best option. It was the most prolific. Everyone had duct tape. People didn't, there just wasn't a better option. But you know what? We used to have phones that were connected to the wall with a cord. And so, we're capable of human beings to upgrade and to avail of ourselves of better options. So yeah, duct tape definitely belongs in the car, in the shop, maybe wrapped around your water bottle in case you need a splint, a fracture.
tape up a laceration like butterfly
No.
stitches.
No, there's better products for that too. I mean, come on. But duct tape just doesn't belong. It causes too many issues. There's just better products. The adhesive is messy. It creates a big old mess. It doesn't breathe at all. It slides around and creates more skin injuries. And then if you try to take it off, and there's more skin injuries. It's a whole thing. Just stop it with the duct tape, people. Just stop.
So I see three major topics we can discuss here about foot care. One being foot care maintenance, one being foot care plan. And I think I want to start with that one, Tanya, is let's talk about a foot care plan, because you said most people don't have one. And then the third part is repair, or when the wheels fall off of the bus, when the maceration already happens. That's a good word. We could use that word, can't we, Don?
Intervention.
Yeah, I'm still on question 1. I have some sub questions on my 1 question, so I'm not. This is a part of my 8.
I love this.
You can start thinking about those categories as Don continues down his question path.
It's already in my brain.
Go ahead, Don.
It's already.
So we left the duct tape in the toolbox inside the car. Got it. Doesn't belong there. It was great for the moonshot, but now we have other products. What about the ancient, time-proven white cloth tape, athletic tape? That's bad too.
Leave it on the soccer field.
All right.
Leave it on the soccer field. It's made for short duration. You need it for the game for like 45 minutes or something like that. It just don't.
Gotcha. So
strike 2, Freeman. Strike 2.
I'm working
into it.
He knows
the answers.
We're painting the corners. We're going to put it down the middle of the plate. So the duct tape stays, the athletic tape stays, and now I'm shopping.
No, you get rid of them. She said get rid of them.
It stays out.
Yeah, the duct tape's in the toolbox. The medical tape is in the medical kit for other stuff.
And now I have access to Amazon Prime to every product known to man. And so I'm searching through, what do you suggest that I look for to get rid of the duct tape and the athletic tape?
So the standard tape for most foot care issues or most foot care interventions is kinesiology tape. Mm-hmm. And there's all different kinds. They're all basically the same. I do have some YouTube videos explaining the difference. There's woven and non-woven. Everyone said, maybe try something that says they're waterproof. But the way that I and John have always recommended using it, it kind of levels the playing field. So kinesiology tape is absolutely perfect. It's breathable, stretchable, lengthwise, not widthwise. You can mold it around the toes with no problems. It's perfect.
Now, Scott, before you get to your 3 categories, I do have one follow-up, if I could. You mentioned the word sweat. It's just not the creaks, but it's a sweat. And then I started thinking, when we sweat and we reach up on our face and everything's white on our shirt, there are a lot of electrolytes that come out with that sweat. So now you have something very corrosive, and it can cause some trauma to the skin. So it's just not water, but it's that sweat in there as well.
100%. It's salt water.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that becomes problematic.
Damaging.
Yeah.
Much more damaging than water.
Was that just an observation, Freeman, or was there a question there?
Well, no, there was no really question, but it was just some validation. It was some validation that I heard something I hadn't really thought about. So thank you for that, Dr. Olson. I appreciate it. Go with your 3 categories, Scott.
I love that. And I'm always happy when there's water on a course, because it's usually the one time it can get people to think about their feet, for God's sake.
Yeah.
So maybe is there an advantage to stepping through that water and getting rid of some of the electrolytes in there as a mode of prevention? I mean, shoes drain very well. It might be a chance to get it out, as long as there's not sand and grit in the water.
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. So typically, so running shoes are made to have the weather pass through them, especially trail shoes. And so the actually more of a problem when you go through water like a creek or a river with when you're running trails is that sediment that's been filtering through. It's been dry and kind of floating around and floating out of your shoes. That gets waterlogged and wet, and it kind of now becomes sediment in your shoe, and it kind of gets trapped in the shoe. That's actually more of a problem, because now you have grit that's in one spot, and then your skin is kind of interacting with that silt and grit that is now congealed on the bottom of the footbed of your shoe. So that's actually more of an issue than the actual water.
Hmm. Well, Scott, instead of me running away with all my 8 questions, let's get into those categories.
Yeah, so the three main categories. I want to start with the middle one first. Let's talk about prevention. And I'm going to throw out some. This could be fact, fiction, good news, bad news. I've seen some runners that spend quite a bit of time at the beginning of the race taping every toe, taping the the bottoms of their feet, and almost making a sock out of the kinesio tape, or and I will throw in what's the KT tape? That's not kinesio tape, is it?
It's a kinesiology tape. I try to not be brand specific unless I need to
Oh,
be
okay.
brand specific. Yeah.
Okay. So is that what you mean by preventative, or is it bathing your foot in Vaseline or Aquifer or squirrel's nut butter? Tell us about what you see. If you were going to run a race, how would you prevent blisters?
Okay, let's just dovetail on what Don was asking earlier. We need to put down the Vaseline and the Aquaphor and the Desitin and back away slowly. The 90s have called. They want all of that back. There are far superior products. Like, I could go into a dissertation of why there are better products and the issues that those products cause. There was a time and a place when there was no other option. We have much better options now. So number one, I am a firm believer in less is more when it comes to your feet. So the more you learn about your feet, the more educated you are about the properties and the products that you're choosing, and have everything be specific to your foot and your history and the weaknesses there, and then also the terrain and the conditions that you're going to be running in. So I'm an educator. I actually got my doctorate in education last April. That was crazy.
Nice.
So my platform is to educate people. I want people to thank you. It was a lot. I want people to think better. So the whole, I just always use this one thing. I feel like there's an impairment in thinking that way. Like, you don't just use the same hydration product or the same nutrition strategy regardless of the race. Like, we have a hydration and nutrition strategy A to Z, and you don't even have a foot care plan, or you just are dogmatically religiously devoted to a product that somebody recommended sometime, but you don't know why it's good. And so then you aren't able to make those race specific changes to a product that's more specific to it. So wait, where did I lose my train of thought? Where was I going with that? Give me a guardrail.
How do you prepare for a race? What products do you use? What do you do?
Okay, so maceration prevention is critical. And so I'm Switzerland. I recommend products specifically because of their characteristics and their properties. But the two that are kind of the best known and the best products now available are, squirrel's nut butter is a coconut oil based product. It has more of an emollient, meaning it gets absorbed by the skin. It's vegan, all natural. That's a really good product to be using, especially the Happy Toes, because it's got tea tree oil and peppermint oil, which is antifungal and antibacterial. That's really good for kind of daily maintenance, for like moisturizing your skin and kind of keeping your calluses at bay. But that, you see, that's available everywhere. For more extreme conditions, Salty Britches is a lanolin based product, and it is the burliest product available. It's a skin barrier ointment. And the lanolin actually binds to the lipids or the fats in the skin. So it's a true skin barrier. The melting point with Salty Britches is 200 degrees, whereas a coconut oil tends to be, around 90 or 100 degrees. So, and people think that those products are competitors. They're really so profoundly different. They're not. They're in different classes. So Salty Britches is my go-to for recommendation for more extreme conditions, for people who are going to be out even if it's not an extreme race, but tend to be out there longer, or they don't want to dick around or having to reapply the product, because that's when you should time your shoe and sock changes with the length of time that it takes for your maceration prevention product to wear off. So maceration prevention is critical. And then less is more for feet. You want to tape only because where you need to tape, but there's a learning curve. And so some people are a little bit more cautious and more preventative. So they'll tape everything. And then ideally when they're first learning, but that's time consuming. And ideally what happens is you learn over time the specific areas that your feet need to be taped. And there's some tells you can look at where the calluses are, kind of how your toes are positioned, what they do when that's a whole entire podcast. But there's tells where that can give you an idea. I generally recommend if you're taping more than 2 toes, give some toe socks a try and see if that can help with the toe irritation that you're having, because that's just less to mess with. You want to have less to mess with and have a real specific plan. So it's kind of a general answer, but know your feet and prevent maceration, and then build your plan from there.
As you speak about this, the old saying, try nothing new on race day, right?
Oh no, foot care doesn't count. Nip. Foot care does not count as something new, because no, it doesn't. It does not, because you're trying to prevent something. There's nothing you're going to do for foot care that's going to cause your foot to have a problem, unless you go use duct tape and Vaseline, and then that's on you, buddy. No, seriously, are you with that logic, let's say you get a blister during a race and you sit down and you're like, oh no, don't repair the blister because that's something new and it's race day.
No, wait,
there you go, Freeman. You just got handed.
See how I really feel. I hear that, but I do hear that. And I will tell you that is not with foot care, that doesn't count. But you bring up a very salient point. Ideally, your foot care plan should not be implemented for the first time during a big race. You should be futzing around with stuff during your training runs and fine tuning and figuring and futzing. And, it shouldn't be your first iteration. But if it is your first iteration, ideally you have somebody like me doing your pre-foot, all the things, or you just do your best. But good question.
That was my point. That was my point. No, we do have an opportunity to experiment on our long runs, on our long day, to find out what works. Like, oh, that tape doesn't work. As soon as I put 5 miles in, it starts to unravel and moves in my shoe. And now I'm running on a piece of tape instead of it protecting me. We have a perfect opportunity to start developing our strategies, finding out what product and what technique works best for us. So that's what I was
100%. Yes, yeah. 100%. And then here's the thing, look at your feet immediately after you finish your long run, because you can see if you pay attention, you can start kind of listening to the story your feet are telling you. If you use a anti-maceration product and you're out there for 5 hours and you take your shoes and socks off after the run and your feet skin is kind of pale and a little bit wrinkly, that tells you that product didn't last 5 hours. And that you may need a different product. You may need to apply more. You may need to have reapplied it at 2.5 hours. So those are some things to really kind of take a look at. Is look at your feet, and they'll help you fine tune your strategy during your training runs.
Now we preach every podcast almost that it's this whole thing is an experiment of one. There's no hard and fast rules. Tanya, you may disagree with that, but I'm thinking if someone is new to ultra running and they're thinking, okay, I need to take care of my feet. I'm going out for my, some long runs this weekend or whatever. Would you suggest taking some of this salty britches and applying it to the bottoms? Is it just the bottoms, or you go in between the toes everywhere and just go out and see how that works? And then at the end of the run, like you said, look and see how do my feet look after that long run?
Yes, 100%. Because the length of time a product will last to protect your skin from maceration is multivariant. People have different sweat rates. And so that is something to know. If you know you have sweaty feet, spray some antiperspirant on them. And that can cut down on the volume of sweat that's being produced. The terrain and the conditions that you're running in. If you're running in Florida in the humidity, that's going to be a little different than if you're running out in Arizona in the desert. And so paying attention to how your skin is responding to whatever intervention that you're trying. But no, your whole foot sweats, especially between your toes. Like, have you ever wondered, your toes have been next to each other for your entire life and they only argue when you run a long race. That's maceration.
Yes,
because the skin is made fragile by maceration. You're all, why are you guys fighting? My whole life, you've been next to each other. You went to the market, you stayed home. Why are we fighting? Good question.
I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask because somebody else is going to ask the question. Do waterproof socks or shoes have any place in our sport?
Oh, this is a really good question. And so interestingly enough, I was on a podcast in the UK earlier this week. And the answer is, again, you need to think about why you're choosing what you're choosing. So so when you're thinking waterproof socks, let's just go with that to start with. If the conditions are warm, your waterproof socks are going to do what? Are they going to make they going to make your foot warm and more sweaty?
Yes.
And then you have
it's
a freaking bathtub in there. Exactly. But if it's in the UK and it's 50 degrees, it's in the 40s and 50s, and you have and there's a lot of moisture, like you're running through bogs and that kind of thing, they're using waterproof socks on the regular because the conditions call for it. So the feet don't sweat and they don't heat up as much. Waterproof socks in the United States, waterproof socks and shoes in the United States are more appropriate for winter running, where it's cold. And you're protecting also from where it's cold and wet, because cold and wet makes cold colder. You just like steam makes heat hotter. And so those are some things to consider. And of course, regardless of if you're using a waterproof sock, you still need an anti-maceration product because your feet are still sweating. Those 250,000 sweat glands don't quit. They're still doing the thing. And then with the waterproof socks, a lot of folks will need a liner, like a thin liner, to kind of absorb the moisture that that your foot is producing, like a little, yeah. And so that can be a nice combination, but know why you're choosing it.
Now, earlier you said if you're running in Florida where there's a lot of humidity, right, it's going to be different than running somewhere that doesn't have that humidity, which made me think, what about lower elevations versus a run with higher elevations? You're running something in Colorado versus something at sea level. Do you see difference in feet care for those two situations? Would you change it if you were
Well,
running
the
at elevation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the main variable between low elevation and high elevation is the dryness of the air. So you're going to have less humidity, lower humidity the higher you go. And then sometimes there's more extreme conditions, like it gets colder, that kind of thing. The other variables to also consider is like, is it a technical trail? What do you typically run on? If you're typically training on lower elevation, that tends to be in general more of a flatter environment. And so you're not going to be as skilled or experienced on hills. And then you go, like a Florida runner going to run the mountains, a mountain race in Colorado or California that's just there's a whole mess of things they need to kind of consider that they wouldn't need to consider in Florida, in the flats of Florida.
You mentioned mountain running. What do you see that is worse, uphill or downhill for beating up the feet?
Well, that kind of depends on it. Kind of depends on the runner and what's going on. So uphill, because people are moving more slowly, typically, we're not having impact injuries. We're having it's just more, uphill is really not super different than on the flats, with the exception of the stress on the plant on the bottom of the soft tissue of the bottom of the foot and the calf complex. That is more can become more problematic when you're running up hills, especially if you're not used to it. And there's a whole complex of things that I see with the foot. I don't want to say deformities, but the foot anatomy changes if you have limited soft tissue in the back of in your calf, or soft tissue range in the back of your calf and your foot. So that's just more. I'm going to look at more soft tissue related, soft tissue stress related issues if you're going uphill. And then the normal stuff where it's time and maceration for uphill. Whereas downhill, you have more of a chance for impact issues. So if you're running downhill, there's two different people who run downhill. There's people who know how to run downhill, and the time that their foot is on the ground is very slim, or is very, very short, because they've got a quick turnover, and they're bombing down the hill because they have the balance, proprioception, and training and technique. And so you're going to have the chance of having some actual impact of like the pinky toe or the big toe on the end of the shoe, that you can have actual impact that can cause tissue damage. Now, if you're more of a less skilled a runner, as far as technique and familiarity with running downhill, you're on the brakes the whole time, or you're on the brakes a lot more. So your initial contact, or the amount of time your foot is spending on the ground, is actually longer, but there's more friction. So if your foot's on the ground for longer when you're running downhill, your foot hits the ground and then slides in the shoe, and then you pick it back up, and you're kind of doing the same thing to your quads, which is a whole conversation. But so it's a little bit different, but preventive strategies can be fine tuned. So if you bomb down hills and your big toe, no matter what you do, always gets injured, then using a silicone toe cap can just take all your problems away. The same thing with the pinky toe. There's a whole reason why those both tend to get injured. It could easily be another podcast, but long answer, short question. Hopefully that was helpful.
Help me out with
Yes.
a quick term that you said, Tanya. Silicone toe cap. I've never heard that. What is that?
Oh, yay! I'm glad I talked about it. Otherwise known as toe condoms. So
I've never heard of them.
No, you haven't? Oh my gosh, this is fantastic. I'm so glad we get to talk about it. So a silicone toe cap is just what it says. It's a little cap that goes on your toe. You absolutely have to have ventilation holes. So there's different options, like if you go to Amazon and go toe caps. And so the silicone absorbs pressure and absorbs pressure and prevents tissue damage. And the most common areas are pinky toe that's getting crushed underneath the fourth toe, and then the big toe that's getting crushed because it's hitting the end of either the end of the shoe because you're bombing down the hills, or you don't have a lot of range of motion in the big toe joint. Like that's a thing. People need to know kind of what their range is. If you have limited range, that big toe can kind of get beat up. But yeah, they're magical. They're magical. I
Wow.
think everyone, anyone who has any interest in foot care, it's not a bad thing to have some toe caps, so little toes and big toes. You can just slip those on. You can put them on over the toe socks. If it's in the middle of the race and you want to mess around, or you can put them on underneath if you know that they're helpful, putting them underneath the toe socks can keep them nice and secure. But they're magical for pressure related issues. So you have to kind of clinically reason or deduce like where, and there's indicators as to what the source of the injury is. Like if you're having bruising, toenail is turning different colors. If your pinky toe looks like a triangle, it's getting crushed. And so it needs it needs some padding. And the silicone is just squishy enough, and it's fantastic. They're fantastic.
Let's talk about toenail care. Before a race, should I
Oh.
take the time to do some pre-race trimming? And if so, how should I cut them back or leave them long or make them square? Tell us about toenails.
Oh, good question. So yes, ideally, you're taking care of your toenails on a regular basis. So you're not doing something new the day before a race, because you could get a little aggressive, cut things down a little too low, or get frustrated and do 2-3 toenails and then just give up, and then show up the next day and be like, whatever,
Lose
and then
interest?
reap the consequences. I've seen this quite a bit. So ideally, your toenails are short and flat across the top. That reduces the risk for ingrown toenails. But the nail bed have different morphologies or different shapes. Some are naturally flat across the top. Some have more of a curve. But regardless, to have them, you want to have a tiny little white line for your big toe, especially. But you need to have those filed down or trimmed down and filed. I would recommend before a race, if the race is Saturday, do your toenail care Monday to let things kind of settle, just in case you get aggressive or something goes south. And then for race day, one thing to kind of consider is in the old days, in the earlier editions of fixing your feet, the thought process was if you're losing your toenails, it's because your toes are hitting the end of the shoe. That is less likely to be the reason that that's happening. It's multifactorial. Your toes are actually a lot of people, their toes are actually moving a fair amount. So as their foot is in swing phase, meaning it's going from behind you to in front of you to land on the ground, a lot of folks, if they have decreased range of motion, especially in the ankle complex, the toes will lift up a lot higher than somebody who has the full range in the ankle. And then that can also be a habit too. So the toes are if they're moving quite a bit in the shoe, that leading edge of the toenail can be catching on the sock with every step. And if that toenail is that full thickness all the way down to the end, you're getting a little bit of pulling up that toenail up off of the nail bed, thousands of times throughout that race. So if you're doing a bigger race, especially if the conditions are going to be more mountainous, if you file down the toenails lengthwise so that you reduce the leading edge, you're functionally shortening the nail by thinning that last quarter inch or so, and it's pliable now. And if it's pliable at the end, if you've reduced the leading edge, the toenail is going to be less apt to catch on, whether it's the sock or whatever it's catching on. But it's also going to bend and not get wrenched up off of the nail bed and create a blood blister underneath, such as in the instance of, like if you kick a rock. So that's always a good thing to do for before a bigger race, but that's a little bit more time consuming. You can train a pedicurist if
Pedicurist.
you have, if you have a local person. I actually have a 1-page sheet that I share with pedicurists or runners who want to share it with her, and it's visuals, so there's not a language issue, and so that they can do an athletic pedicure. And so then that takes up the time from you having to file down your toenails, or a partner, a friend or a stranger that you've paid down the street.
Is that in Fixing Your Feet 7th edition?
It is. And that's been
Okay,
John Von Hoff's, that's been his peeve for, I will usually just let him do when we work together side by side for 10 years at Michigan Bluff. If I saw somebody's toenails were all janky, I'm like, I'll let John help explain your toenail situation to you.
All right, Tanya, I have a friend, and it's not Don. I have another friend. And let's say that this friend has lost their big toenails. Hypothetically, this friend has lost their big toenails a few times. And over the years, that toenail, instead of growing normal and out, it gets thicker.
Yep.
How is that rectified? So I can tell my friend how to fix that.
Yes, your friend. Wink, wink. So we can dial it back to the causative variables, which tend to be range of motion and the big toe. If your big toe doesn't go back to 90 degrees, if you reach down and pull it up, if it doesn't come back to 90 degrees, it has impaired range of motion. And the way that it moves. Yeah. And so if your toe does it, sorry for those of you who are not able to see what I'm doing, but I will explain as best I can.
90 degrees? Stop a minute, Tanya. I'm trying to bend my toe. 90 degrees? You're serious?
Oh, she's got it.
This is a normal toe. That's normal. 90 degrees is for dorsiflexion for the big toe is actually within normal. That's normal range.
What if my friend only goes 45?
Yeah. So what's happened? Very common. I think your friend might have the complex of foot morphology, or that is, I see consistently with consistent foot care issues. So what ends up happening is,
you're telling my friend is screwed.
This is 100% no, like 100% no, absolutely not. This is well within my area of expertise here.
Okay.
So think about it. So your foot is designed to land on the ground and have all of your toes flat on the ground, with your toenails parallel to the supporting surface. If you have impaired range of motion in your ankle, and you put your foot on the ground, then the soft tissue in your foot and your calf can be pulling your toes into a clawing the ground. So for somebody like your friend, who I'm deducing is a male, who tend to be more strong. What I typically see is, if you have impaired range in the ankle, or impaired range in that big toe, it changes the way you toe off. So the foot is made to land flat with your toes flat. All the pressure is spread out across your metatarsal heads, which is like the ball of your foot. Your toenails are parallel to the ground, not perpendicular in a claw position. And then you're supposed to toe off with all of the pressure of your foot across the ball of your foot with your toes flat. The type of foot that I see that is overrepresented in consistent foot care issues is a foot that doesn't lay flat, where the toes are not able to lay flat, and they are in a claw position when you toe off. So if you're in a claw position when you toe off, that toenail is perpendicular and being smashed into the footbed with every stride. And then it's magnified by, if you have a lower drop shoe, which is the trend nowadays, but you have a higher drop ankle. Like if your ankle doesn't have as much mobility, you need a higher drop to allow the tissue in your calf and your foot, the soft tissue, to be able to do what it needs to do and set it up for what it needs to be able to do. If you have a high drop ankle and you're wearing a low drop shoe, now that's going to pull your toes into a claw position more so. But then if you have limited range in your big toe, because it can't flex back, you can't toe off through in the middle of your foot. So then you toe off predominantly on the big toe, and you're kind of cantilevering, and that big toenail is just being just smashed back up off of the nail bed. And then once you've had that kind of trauma, the nail bed becomes damaged. And then, like you said, it gets thicker. And so you can't unring that bell, but there's plenty of things that you can do, like namely, not during training, because it's typically not causing your friend any trouble during the shorter training runs. But when you're going to do a bigger event, file that down. And so for that, you might need an electric file, like that are made for like pedicures or manicures. You can get it's basically a drill with a tiny sandpaper on it. You can file that down so that it's not taking up as much space, because that reduces the chance of damage. And then you may be a candidate for toe caps, a toe cap on the big toe. And then if you don't have as much range in that big toe, shoe components that increase or assist the transition time, or decrease it from initial contact when your foot hits the ground and toe off. So something that has more of like a rocker bottom type sole, that's going to assist that. We call that in physical therapy, you accommodate the anatomy, you accommodate that range of motion. And so a rocker soled shoe, something that has a little bit of a stiffer sole, because then the sole will take the trauma and not your big toe. It's not concentrated on that big toe when you toe off. So it's kind of a long answer. And that's actually kind of that's a course that I'm needing to create because this is a conversation I'm having all the time with runners about the why behind their toenails are getting damaged and all that. And it's multifactorial, and it's possible to remediate and to live a better foot life.
But I will say that the people that have those black toenails like to show them off. I mean, it's almost,
and that's a part of the sick and twisted world of the ultra running. And that I don't understand how abusing your body, especially the one body part that is absolutely essential to running, is a point of pride. Like it just, I want to single-handedly change that thought process. And I think really it comes from a place of people don't know any better. So, you just kind of make a joke of it. But like, who wants nasty black toenails? Like, seriously, especially if you live in the South and you're wearing sandals, like that's just not kind to the people around you.
Tanya, so I'm going to get us back on the main trail that we were on.
Oh yes, very good.
Talking about a toe or a foot care plan when we're out there on the long run. You talked about these anti maceration things, whether it's what's the squirrel's nut butter, happy toes, or whether that's
toes.
Salty britches, or whether it's some kinesio tape in strategic areas. Let's talk about some other things in the plan, like socks, different types of socks, multiple socks, having a thin pair and a thicker pair. Shoes, should we get the ones with the wide toe box? Should we, what kind of things physically with socks and shoes would go into a good foot care plan?
Oh, very good question. So, there's so many quality socks out there. We don't have people showing up with cotton socks anymore. Like, those days are past. It's kind of like the phone with the cord. Really, just a sock with good quality fibers. Some people prefer like natural fibers, like merino wool. You know what I discovered? that I
Tell us.
absolutely adore is alpaca fiber socks. Now,
Mm.
the only downside is that I have not seen, and maybe someone will prove me wrong. I've not seen an alpaca fiber sock that has the technical components that most running socks have. You know, where it's like kind of supportive in the arch and has graded compression and that kind of thing. So the alpaca fiber, the brand that I discovered is called Hollow, and alpaca fibers are hollow, much more hollow than even than merino wool and sheep's wool, and that allows for greater regulation of temperature. So it transfers moisture quicker, and the temperature regulation is a lot higher, and then the weight to fiber ratio is very low. You know, a technical sock that I really like is called XO Skins.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really technical fiber. That's a technical sock. It's got PTFE, which is a product or a component that reduces the coefficient of friction, which makes things more slippery. And then it also has copper woven into the yarn. So that's technical, meaning that so the copper increases blood flow, but it's antifungal. And then the PTFE reduces friction. Those are a real thin sock, and they're definitely more. I don't want to say compressive, but they're snug to put on. So, you know, the sock choice that you make, as long as it is really personal, and we have different preferences. Like for me, I grew up in northern Minnesota, so I have an emotional connection with natural fibers like wool and down literally saved my life when I was out in the freaking wilderness, out in the woods, riding my horse, and the blizzards would come in. Like I like a natural fiber, not natural fiber. Somebody else might be fine with something more synthetic. So choosing a sock that fits well, that you like, and aligns with your ethics. You know, there's that. And then, yeah, as far as the doubling up, that's something that you could try if you feel like you're having issues with your foot care. Issues are a result of friction. Friction is when two things are rubbing together, so they're both moving, but there's minimal pressure. That can offload if you have a liner and another sock on top of it, that can transfer that friction to the socks, between the socks, rather than the skin of, it's usually toes that are the issue. Pressure is tape or socks can only protect so much, and that's where you would need to do like a toe cap. A silicone toe cap would be a better option. And then the shoe choices that you're making, I kind of iterated about that earlier, is you need to have a shoe components that actually match your anatomy, the conditions you run in, and the way your foot travels as it goes from initial contact to toe off. And so you need to know what's happening with your foot. And that's a little bit trial and error. There are some objective measures that you can bring in there, like knowing the range of motion you have in your big toe. If it's limited, like I said, that increased the rocker sole. If you don't have a lot of range of motion in your ankle, a higher heel can be more, can put those tissues not so much on end range stretch. But with that said, shoes, variety is where how strength is built. So the same model of shoe is not appropriate for all conditions. It's not that you can't run in the same shoe all the time, but we have different lengths and intensities of our training runs. So your shoes ideally should mimic those the different needs, or the different way you run in the conditions and or intensity that you're going to be running on. Because like as a physical therapist, my job is to think 20 and 30 years down the road. And I'm thinking about that cumulative effect of wearing the same shoes all the time. Your feet are in the same range of motion. It can eventually create issues. And so if you think about a track athlete, like a track shoe, what is it? It's basically a sock with spikes on the bottom. because when you're running fast, you're more on your forefoot. Your foot's on the ground for like a split second. And your foot doesn't, and you're not out there for a long time. So your foot doesn't need a bunch of support and guidance and stability and cushion. Whereas your middle distance runs, and you're out there for a bit of time, a little bit more stability, depending on what you've got going on, a little bit more support can be very helpful. And then the longer runs are a shoe that you're going to want to have more support, more stability based on your own unique needs, and more cushioning is, that's another decision that you're making. Like if you're a bigger runner, a shoe with a little bit more cushion can be helpful over the cumulative miles, but a less cushioned shoe during your mid runs, that variety is really, really beneficial for your foot, ankle, calf complex.
You
And I could
mentioned
go
earlier about
longer.
you mentioned earlier about double layering, and it made me think of the running sock, the right sock, WIRT or IGHT, being 2 layers. Have you seen success with that?
Yeah, I mean, if that's something, if what's going on with a person's foot is, that solves the problem, then that's great. But you kind of need to know your own situation, and so, and this is where I like to educate people to think about what their choices are, not just haphazardly just doing things. I mean, when we're first learning sport, and you kind of like reaching into the void and just doing what people tell you to do. But as time goes on and you become an expert in your own body, you should be making more discerning decisions. So if you're going to choose like a 2-layer sock, because the downside to a right sock is it might be a little thicker. People might not like that. Some people like thin socks, so it's kind of a trial and error thing. But if you're going to choose a 2 layers or something that has 2 layers in it, know that friction, the components of that sock is reducing friction. And so kind of make have that have that variable be what is leading you to using 2 layers.
I have another question about shoes.
Ooh.
And we all know that as we're out there for a long time, our feet swell. And so there's a rule of thumb, I guess, back when I started running, that maybe you should go up half a size or a size. Okay, she's already answering this in a verbal. She's shaking her head so back and forth so hard, I think she's gonna throw her glasses off her face. But I want to finish my question before I get the real answer, the verbal answer. To go up in size so there's room for your foot. But then you have the contradicting argument that the shoe is so big that there's more friction or possibility of friction. What do you suggest, Tanya?
This is a most excellent question. I'm very glad that you asked it. So, let's just think back to the swollen feet, or that you've seen. Did they swell widthwise or did they swell lengthwise?
Widthwise.
Yes. A longer shoe is not going to solve a width issue. Never mind the fact that you're going to be putting a shoe on that's like a 1/4 inch longer or half a centimeter longer than what your brain is used to. So that's going to reduce the vertical clearance and increase the chance of you tripping and falling on your face. So I think a longer shoe, especially putting a longer shoe on a runner later on in a race, is a liability and a big no-no. But let's backtrack to, I am trained to look at the cause. Foot swelling is not normal if you're in a race that's less than 3 days. There's a tiny bit of foot swelling, but if you're consistently having swelling to the point where you feel like you need to have a different shoe or modify your shoe, your hydration strategy needs to be examined. Because a lot of swelling has to do with the electrolyte concentration, whether it's too much or too little. So I would suggest that anyone who feels like they've got enough swelling that they really need to do something different in a race is to kind of see if they can address the actual cause, which is more likely to be a variable is their electrolyte balance, their hydration status. But along that same lines of thinking, reducing the slight uh, swelling that happens, if it's a slight swelling, you can use calf sleeves, not compression socks, for God's sake, because I can't tell you how many $80 compression socks I've actually cut off of a runner in the middle of a race, and it just breaks my heart. So compression sleeves that you run in from the beginning of the race provides support to the lymphatic system and the venous system in your lower leg. And so the arteries have muscles in them, and the arteries they go away from the heart, and they pump blood through your body, and the vessels themselves can create pressure by contracting the muscles in the vessel. Veins are just a tube. They don't have that ability to contract. And so the veins, the blood flow through the veins is facilitated or helped by muscle contraction. And then the lymph system is what's picking up all the trash that your cells are kicking out. And so when you're running, that the lymphatic and venous system are kind of impaired in their ability to do their job because their feet are down towards gravity and you're not, it's the whole thing. So compression sleeves can help with reducing the amount of swelling that happens in the feet. And then ideally, if you do have swelling, you have a shoe that's a little bit wider. Or you can switch, like if you're a person who likes thicker socks, you may switch to thinner socks, and that could be enough. But Scott, you're right. Like if you've got a big roomy shoe and your foot's just sliding around in that, you can be causing more problems. And that's kind of something that some choices that you can make based on your specific situation. So pay attention to what's going on. But calf sleeves are very helpful. And I always recommend that with that whole venous and lymphatic system, if you put on compression socks like right after you get done, that's going to help your recovery start right away, because it's helping your body bring all that gunk and crud from the inflammatory response and from that day out on the trails. But for races that are 3, 5, 6 days long, at about day 3, swelling it's happening in your entire body. So there's some different choices that you need, or ideally you're going to prepare for that and have a wider shoe. And then there's you can modify the shoe. I don't recommend cutting holes, more along the lines of just releasing the fabric in the shoe. But ideally, you have a appropriate shoe that gives your foot the room that it needs without having to cut through the fabric, because then you create a whole new mess because a bunch of crud gets in there. But yeah, anyhow, did that help? Was that a good answer?
It is amazing at how efficient the body is at returning blood back to the heart, because
yes,
the arteries have every advantage. They've got a heart pumping it out. They've got muscles through the arteries making this fluid continue and travel, and it has to rely on pumping it back through a gravity system only to bring it back up. How does it even work? It seems like
I know, right?
You should be out of blood, and it should be all in your feet.
Oh my God, you should have foot balloons.
So my final question for me, anyway.
Yes.
That I apologize if you've never heard it before. Should I?
Oh, I've heard it.
Should I pop a blister, or should I just ride with what I've got? And I know that you've answered that 1,000 times, so make it 1,001 for me.
Very good question. So let's just establish this fact. Never in the history of a blister has one ever improved by ignoring it. So
True.
when it comes to lancing, lance early to prevent the carnage. Prevent carnage. You want to lance early and protect it. So, with that, if you ignore a blister and you're just in denial, because it's not just a river in Egypt, what's going to happen? Eventually, the roof of that blister is going to split. And now you've got the dermis exposed. And then you got silt and dirt and crud that's getting ground into the dermis. And that's painful. And it's just annoying. And it just makes that blister hurt even more than it could have. So now you created an entire skin tear and a flap and exposed dermis. Whereas which is not pretty, and it's not comfortable in any way, shape, or form. And so lancing that blister in a controlled setting, using an 18 gauge, 1.5 inch long safety needle is the best option for trail side maintenance. It's just wide enough that it's thick enough that it makes a hole that's wide enough that that's not going to seal back up. Pro tip, if you can, because I'm actually rather empathetic with my runners. Like, I feel like they're going through enough. I have no interest in tough love or any of that crap. Like, these people, I know they signed up for it, but they don't need somebody beating up on them. So, and being efficient. So if you take the needle and you run it through the blister and it enters the front and exits the back of it, then you've made 2 holes with 1 puncture, and you kind of wiggle it a smidge to make sure the holes are a little bit wider. Now you only had to puncture the skin 1 time. You're more efficient, and then you can tape that up. And then I guess the thing we haven't talked about is you've got your kinesiology tape, but you should always be using a liquid resin to make the skin tacky so that the tape will stay on for a much longer period of time. Another thing that has gone by the wayside the last 6 years or 7 years now is tincture of benzoin. So that used to be the go-to product that you'd apply to the skin so that it makes the tape stick better. But what I've found is that mastisol or skin tack are superior products. They're not messy. They make a much tackier product, a tackier surface for the tape to stick to. And I guess the quality of them, I'll compare, like skin tack is like an Indy car in quality. Mastisol is Formula One. The price point's a little higher with masticosol. It's a tiny little thing. So if you're treating lots of folks, like can be a little bit more economical for skin tack. But using a liquid resin, because ideally, especially during an event, you don't want to be. If you do things well, you shouldn't have to once you tape, you're done with that area. You don't have to retape, even if you're crossing cricks and all that. I've had tape. I've done foot care consults with runners who've done multi-day races like Moab 240, where the tape lasted for 5 days, the entire race, and the feet looked beautiful at the end because the crew just did everything I recommended. Camille Herron's tape in the Further project, it lasted the entire 6 days and 546 miles. Same tape. I mean, you can't touch. Elite runners are like thoroughbreds. The chance of being able to do anything during the race is so slim. So I use mastisol with her, but that's kind of a long answer, but that's a really good question. So everyone should be prepared to lance a blister and then protect it with the tape in a controlled setting so that you're mitigating the damage to the epidermis. So the dermis is less of the dermis is exposed, and you're kind of getting ahead of things. Good question. So everyone should have a kit in their pack.
Tanya, this has been very educational, and we only got to one of the 3 major categories. What I would like to suggest is that we have a part 2 of this conversation where we get back to, we talked a little bit there at the end about intervention once things go wrong. But I think that deserves a little more discussion. And I think another part is the foot care part of the discussion. That's that third category of what can we do when we're not running that can take care of our feet and make our feet happy with us. So if you're okay with it and you agree, and you're on the spot right now because you're being recorded, would you come back for a part 2?
100%. I never pass up an opportunity to talk about all things feet.
Awesome.
So fun fact, I've got a new website called drtanyafootcare.com. And I'm moving things. The vision is to have all of my foot care resources in that one spot. Right now I've got, videos and all that, videos on YouTube. YouTube is really great because it's kind of that whole library. Instagram, everything posts on Facebook as well. So I've got good instructional videos, but the drtanyafootcare.com is the place I want to have all things foot care. So people have like a one-stop shop for any questions that they may have and have any resources. So
Perfect.
yeah, let's do this again.
We'll link that in the show notes. And here's the homework for the audience. If you have feet, here's the homework. The homework is go check out Dr. Tanya's Foot Care, or Dr.
No,
Tanya Foot Care.
drtanyafootcare.com.
drtanyafootcare.com. Take a look at that. And more importantly, go pick up the 7th edition of Fixing Your Feet, because it has all of the latest stuff, including all of the cool products that Tanya talked about. I made a list here of stuff that I've never heard of. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things that I have never heard of.
This is fantastic.
Fantastic information. So thank you for coming on and helping us learn a little bit more about our feet. And we'll have you on again.
Thank you for having me. I have a list. If you message me, I can send you. I have a PDF with all foot care products that I recommend.
We'll get that from you. I'll email you and we'll put it in the show notes. How about that?
Yay, let's do that. Fantastic. All right. This has been amazing. I'm so happy.
Well, most important thing is take care of your feet and go out and run.
Maz.